Okay, so after waiting for our pieces to dry, or at least be dry to the touch, which is good enough. They may look kind of wet still, but as long as it's dry to the touch, that's good enough for the purposes of what we need to do here. So let's start with the Necron bumps. Now for this, I'm just going to once again just use a cheap paint, just cheap green, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the black that I used earlier. Now I'm not going to need very much, because for this I'm going to be using a dry brushing technique. And if you don't know what dry brushing is it sounds very simple, and it is very simple. You put a bit of the paint on the tip of the brush that's dry, not with any water. And sometimes it even helps to, after you've put your brush into the paint, to brush off the paint you have on your brush onto the piece of paper. So that way you don't have a lot of paint on what you're doing. Normally dry brushing is going to be used for things like metals. You're going to be using dry brushing techniques on metal swords or on, let's say, bolt guns or something like that. You might use it on different types of weapons or anything that's supposed to be greasy. Instead of using oil, you can do a dry brushing technique. It's one of the ways to make things look like metal. Now for this, I'm not wanting it to look like metal, I'm wanting it to look a little bit like crystal. Which is kind of weird because it's going to be a dome. So I'm going to be taking a really, really dark green here. Before brushing off my brush as much as I can. And then dabbing it onto my paper towel until just a little bit on the brush. Taking the piece and just really lightly going across it. It's just the tip. And you just want a little bit of the paint to be getting on, not too much. But because I made this so dark, it's probably not even going to be noticed. So I can probably go on with it with a bit more of it. Yeah, okay, so I made that too dark. So let's add a little bit more green in. Add that into the dark green that I've made. That's looking better. Something kind of like a Dark Angel's green is kind of what you would want. Just dry brush that off. And take your piece. And you want it to show a little bit of the green, but not too much. You don't want it to be this overbearing green thing. Because the green that you're going to want the attention to be brought to is going to be in the symbol, where you're going to be adding a much brighter green, where it will be glowing from. I'm not sure if you can see much of a difference there on the camera. Now, dry brushing usually picks up on the details that are and contours of the model or whatever you're painting, kind of like an oil would. So in this case of this foam, it's picking up on a lot of the imperfections in it, because it was filed down. Oh, dropped it. It's a little better. Alright. So we're almost done. So to finish those off, we're going to need to have a bright green. But not too bright. The green that came in the tube would probably be sufficient. So just take a little bit of that out, put it on under palette. In this case I'm going to be looking for the thinnest brush I have, which was probably the one I was just using. So this brush is nowhere near thin enough to be doing the job that I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to use a toothpick. I don't know, you're thinking, whoa, Max, you can't paintbrush with a well, you can't paint with a toothpick, but I'm saying no. Think outside the box. So you just put your toothpick inside there and put it around. And just kind of like when you were scoring it before, when you were making it, you just fill the score in with the bright green. Sorry if it's blurry. I'm kind of messing around with this camera still. I'm just trying to figure it out. But yeah, you just try to get as much paint as you can inside the grooves. It would help if I put some water into it, then it would sink in. Getting in this circle is going to be the main part. And if you mess up, don't worry about it. You can just cover that up with another coat. It's not the end of the world if you're just if you mess up on just a piece of terrain. Don't worry. And we work on the other one. Add a little bit more water into the green here so it sinks in better. Wasn't really pleased on how it went in with the other one. So the main part is you just got to get as much of that into the bottom. That's the important part, as long as it's at the bottom. Oops. I want to go back and do a little bit of redo on this. Okay. So I can put those aside for now. Wash your hands of any of the paint that may be on you. Then I'm going to take that excess green that I have there, add a tiny, tiny little bit of black. Just a very, very tiny amount. Mix that in with some water. A little bit of that area where my other dark green was. I'm going to make another small bit of dark green and fix the errors that I made on there. Just cover them up with the darker green. Go for this one. Just cover that up with the darker green. There we go. So I let those dry, and those are done. So going back to the hill after it's dried, you can now start adding other coats of brown. Now you're going to start with the darkest and then move your way up to the lighter coats. And in this case, once again, I'm using just cheap paints that I got in a paint set. So I'm going to start this off with a burnt umber. And as these paints are really pasty, I'm going to add some water in. Make sure to mix it up really well. And any of the paint that's on the brush, just use it right away. Now for the first coats, you're going to want to go a little bit heavier than with the other coats. Also, you're going to want to go and try to find any of the areas you didn't hit with the first coat. After that, with the other lighter ones, you're going to want to mainly use those as highlights. Now the reason you want to start off with the darkest color and move up to the lighter colors with this is because you're using the lighter colors mainly as just a highlight, just to give texture and different color to the sand that you're going to be going on, instead of having one monochromatic ground. I'm going to add a little bit more water into it. Make sure that it really mixes in there and gets into the cracks. You want to really make sure it hits the bottom and covers up the foam. Once again, if any of the sand comes off, it's alright. Most of it won't come off, so don't worry, as long as you glued it in securely. So once you run out of paint, just pour yourself some more, mix in a little bit of water, and add a little bit more this time so that way I can try and speed this up, just make sure I'm not wasting anyone's time here. It's okay if you miss the sides, the edges, or if you hit the inside scorching, because it'll give a little bit of variation on how the piece looks. And on the scorching, you're going to be adding brown into that anyway, a little bit of brown.